Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the Medical Talk. Today we have with us Dr. Adeel Shamim. Dr. Adeel is a bariatric and robotic surgeon at the Mercy Fort Smith Hospital, and I'm very happy to have him here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we usually start our conversations by talking about early life. Where were you born and raised, and what was your early education like?
So I was born in Karachi, and at a very early age, we actually migrated to Canada. So I grew up in Toronto and did my early education there. We eventually moved back to Karachi, and then I ended up going to Al Khan University for med school. The move back to Pakistan was tough. Trying to I guess the whole society was different. There was like a different vibe altogether. So gelling into the Pakistani society was tough initially. Yeah. But I wouldn't I wouldn't have it any other way. I think it was meant to be. It was a good learning experience, and going to Al Khan really completely changed me as a person and made me into who I am today.
That's great. Why did you choose medicine as a career? Who was your inspiration?
I mean, as a Pakistani, as Desi, we're usually told what we're supposed to do. So that kind of what was going on in the back with my family. So we're 6 siblings, and no one really wanted to do medicine. I guess I was a scapegoat for my siblings. So I ended up taking the bullet for the siblings and just I guess biting the bullet rather and going to med school.
I think that's almost every Pakistani story.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing too unique.
When you were choosing a specialty, why did you choose surgery? And how do you think that medical students right now who are in that process can choose a specialty and decide what they really want to do?
Right. So my dad's a surgeon. So, I had that chip on me. So because I was the one that went to med school, and amongst my siblings, I was also told, I think I should do surgery. But throughout med school, I was actually, by the process of elimination, ruled out what I didn't want to do. Yeah. I guess it was just meant to be that surgery is kind of what I liked. Yeah. Other fields I just never felt comfortable or I just was not interested in. Yeah. So once I decided I really wanted to do surgery, then I had to decide what kind of surgery. And that was kind of like my 5th year sub-I sort of elective theme. When I, again, ruled out what surgical subspecialties I don't want to do. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it was either ENT or Gen Surg. So I ended up doing Gen Surg.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think general surgery, you can go into other subspecialties as well after that.
Oh yeah. Now it's like, so Gen Surg, it's like a stepping stone into like the myriad fellowship trainings that you can get into, right? So I think once you're in general surgery, then throughout residency, you'll see that there's so many other fields that you can go into. That you don't only see in Pakistan, that you'll see if you come to the US and if you rotate in them. So even after general surgery, there's just so much more to do. Like I ended up doing bariatric and robotic surgery.
That's a very interesting kind of surgery.
It's a fairly new field, I must say. Like in the past maybe 10 years, it really picked up in general surgery.
Yeah. So why did you choose to move to the US to practice medicine? Why not the UK or just staying back in Pakistan to practice?
So I think when I was in Al Khan, you have that peer pressure, right? Everyone around you is like studying for US Assembly, and I'm like, what the heck is that? So I kind of looked into it, and one thing led to another, and I kind of realized like the US is really far advanced in terms of technology and healthcare, right? I did look at England, I looked at Canada, I'm Canadian, so I looked at all these different countries, but I guess US just always came up on top in terms of technology, advancement, research, yada, yada, yada. And then just being at Al Khan, you always want to kind of pursue the best, and you're just always pushed in the right direction. So I kind of, once I set my mind that I really wanted to do medicine from the US, I kind of never looked back.
Talking about the USMLE and the US, when do you think is the best time to start studying for the Step 1 exam? Because obviously it's pass and fail now. So how should students go about it?
Yeah, they should start now. Like the sooner you start, the better it is, right? An exam is basically an obstacle for you to move forward in life. Yeah. The longer you sit on it, the longer you are not moving forward in life. So the quicker you take an exam, the quicker you can move to the next step. So step 1 is not a score anymore, right? So it really doesn't matter how how awesome you are and how much you know. It's just you gotta just pass it now. So it kind of in that sense makes it easier. So the sooner you take your step one, the better it is because the quicker you can move on to the next step, right? And also opens up gates like doors for you. A lot of programs want a step one for electives, right? If you don't have it, you miss out those opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think the sooner you get to it, the better because it's not a score anymore. It's just a pass or a fail. So it doesn't matter if you get like a 230 or a 270, right? So I think the time to prep and the time to start is now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's better if you start early. So what
Yeah.
resources do you think are the best out there for the step one or the step two exam?
So I took mine a decade ago, so it might be a little outdated. But my goal was to stick with a few limited resources and kind of do them really well so that by the end of it I knew like the books inside out, right? That was my strategy, right? Because if you get into it, there's like 1,000 books and 1,000 resources you can go to, and instead of going through all of them superficially, I wanted to go through some of them in depth and kind of memorize it. So I ended up doing Kaplan books, the Kaplan Q banks.
Yeah.
First aid was like my, for a lack of a better term, Bible. I annotated everything in it. Everything that I was learning was going into first aid because I wanted to review it. And then my question bank was UWorld as a form of learning, not as a form of testing myself because
Yeah.
the test that I was preparing for was step one, right? So I was learning. I was just constantly learning, and I used various methods. I also listened to Goldian lectures. Um, Anytime I got free time, and this was in med school, so I was still like in fourth year and fifth year. So anytime in between lectures I got or during lunchtime, I had an iPod at that time, iPod Touch. So I would just plug it in and just listen to the Goldian lectures. So I really made use of the limited resources I had. I kind of just did it over and over and over again. And that's kind of the secret of my success, if you will. If you do something over and over again, you eventually get good at it.
Yeah. I was talking to another doctor as well, and they also mentioned that it's better if you limit your resources and don't try to do everything that is available and just focus on
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna put up more threads on Twitter talking about how I did my in-training exams in surgery and how I did on the board. Same concept, limited resources, stick with it, go over and over again, and by the time you're gonna be an expert in those specific books. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
So what resources did you use for the step two exam?
So the same resources, right? I wanted to keep it simple, right? I wanted to not do the whole 3 reads and UWorld, and I don't know what people are doing. I kind of came up with my own strategy, and this was like in fourth year med school.
Yeah.
So I did well on step one, scored higher than most people that I know, and I'm like, if I did well on step one, why don't I just replicate the strategy for step two? I did the exact same thing. Kaplan books, Kaplan Q bank, everything went in first aid and UWorld, right? And then the Goldian lectures were so awesome because they not only covered your step one, but they were so clinical. So awesome guy. He also helped me out in step two. So I did the exact same things. I'm like, man, I'm doing the exact same thing for step two that I did for step one. And I did the exact same thing for step three as well, just minus a couple of extra books. So USMLE is very redundant in its content. You'll see the same thing coming over and over again in all the steps. So that's why I also mentioned that the sooner you do it, the better it is. You don't have to relearn all of that, right? So I cut so much time off just because I already remembered stuff from step one prep. So I did the same thing on step two, Kaplan, UWorld, first aid, and Goldian.
I think a lot of medical students get very overwhelmed when they look at UWorld because it's a huge question bank. So you mentioned that you used it as a learning tool. So do you recommend that? Do you think it should be used as a learning tool or a testing?
Yeah, I feel like UWorld still isn't enough in terms of questions. They should probably do more questions, right? The more questions you do, the more you realize the examiner's psyche. The more mistakes you make, the more you realize how to not answer that question. Right? So it's definitely supposed to be as a learning tool, not a testing tool. Maybe the self-assessment, you can use that to kind of gauge where you are. I did that at the beginning. So I knew exactly where my weaknesses were, and I knew exactly what I needed to target. I knew my strengths, and so I kind of didn't focus on them too much until the very end. And I just learned. every mistake that I made, I realized how I made that mistake, and I realized how not to repeat it.
Yeah.
There's only a certain amount of ways an examiner can ask a question, right?
Yeah.
But if you've done so many questions, you already know all the ways they're going to ask this. So guess what? When you're on the actual exam, you're like, oh, I've done this question before. I knew exactly where they're going to trick me, and you can answer that correctly and just move on. And towards the end of it, it kind of became like a game, right? So I would read the question, and I would already know the answer, and I would just go through all the wrong choices, eliminate all the wrong choices, and then I would click on the right choice because I wanted to test myself. So it became a game at the end of the day because I'd done so many questions over and over again, and I was like failing my UWorld, right? But I was learning, and I didn't let that get to me.
Now that the step 1 is pass and fail, what do you think they can do apart from that to stand out among the other applicants?
So, I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing is that you can take it sooner, right? Get it out of the way because it's just another obstacle that's going to be there for you to match into residency. So, get it out of the way. It's kind of bad because initially you would have had 2 opportunities to showcase how smart you are. Now you only really have 1. That is your step 2.
Yeah.
And IMGs kind of always have it tough, right? So I think it puts a little more pressure on step 2 now on the exam. But if you do the exact same thing on step 1 and step 2, you're kind of preparing already for step 2, if you think about it, right? You're already studying the same thing that's going to be asked on step 2 questions. So technically, you should be able to do well on step 2 as well, like you would have done previously. But it definitely puts more pressure on the step 2 score now, and PDs are going to be looking for that as a way of kind of filtering out candidates because they won't have a score for step 1. So for IMGs, I think it's a blessing first. Take it which way you want. Get step 1 out of the way. It's just a pass fail now. Same thing like step 3. Just get it out of the way. You don't need to sit on and harper on it. So the only thing they should be focusing on is the step 2 score.
So what qualities do you think that program directors look for in the applicants other than the scores?
Yeah, so especially as an IMG, they need to see that the candidate will fit in, right? That's the most important thing. Is this person gonna fit in my 3 to 7 year program, whatever residency they're applying? So that fit is very important, and that fit comprises of how flexible the person is, how smart they've been, are they good at passing exams, are they going to be a troublemaker in my program, how socially adaptable they are, the collegiality. So all these things kind of fall under how much of a fit they are in my program. So at the end of the day, if you're a good fit for the program director will go out of their way to get you. Does that make sense? Right? There are man-made barriers and there are biases, but that can work in your favor if you're a good fit for the program. So bottom line is if you're a good fit, the program will reach out to get you. And that doesn't matter if you're an IMG or an AMG. And in order to see that fitness or the compatibility, they go through various checkpoints like this person. Is this person going to be passing the boards? Are they going to be troublemaker? Are they going to leave my program? All those things. How successful they've been, and the fact that they can put up with the stresses of residency. You don't want to hire someone and it turns out that they're just going to quit in a year. That's just such a Debbie Downer for a program director. So the program director, if I was to just sum it up, is looking for a person that's going to be a good fit for their program.
Yeah. How do you think that match applicants should filter out the programs when they're choosing programs to apply to?
Right. So it works both ways, right? So program director was looking for a fit. The applicants are also looking for a fit, right? So I'm just throwing it out there. Let's say you have family on the East Coast, right? So you're going to be targeting programs on the East Coast, vice versa, right? If your goal is to target the top 10 programs in the country and you have an application that can do that, then you will be targeting the top 10 programs in the country. It really just depends on your goal. I had a very broad goal. My goal was just to be trained in the US as a surgeon. So I really didn't care if I was going to match at a top 10 program, at a middle, and at a lower tier, because I knew at the end of the day, the program is not going to spoon feed me. It's going to be me that's going to work, that's going to do the hard work, right? So I knew that at face value. So my goal was just to match at a program. I was actually looking for a high board pass rate because that was one thing that I had at the back of my mind. And then where their residents were matching for fellowships. So those are kind of like my criteria. But whatever your criteria is and whatever program fits that criteria, you should apply to, right? You cannot be applying to every single program in the country. Number one, it's not feasible. Number two, financially, you're going to take a big hit. So you need to have your own criteria and then you should need to kind of apply to those programs that meet the criteria. Whether that's a lot of IMGs, whether that's East Coast, big program, small program, high board pass rate, fellowship match rate, so on and so forth.
Recently on Twitter, a lot of Match 2023 applicants have been tweeting about how they're finding it very difficult to write a personal statement and don't really know how to express themselves and sum up their journey. So how do you think that they can write a good personal statement that is impactful as well?
Yeah, so I give this speech every single time when I'm talking to a candidate. A personal statement is supposed to be personal, right? It's supposed to be specific to you. It should not sound like someone else's, right? Because you have not lived their life and they have not lived yours. It should talk about your failures, your successes, your commitment, your hardship, everything that happened with you, right? So it should be totally unique. Do not make my mistake of reading online personal statements, because then I was biased, right? I already knew what other people were writing about, and every time I sat down to write a unique personal statement, the other ideas kind of came in. And at the end of the day, I remember my personal statement was not that unique. Yeah. Because when I was a PGY 4 and when I was a PGY 5 and I was actually conducting interviews and I was reading people's personal statements, I was getting flashbacks of my own personal statements. I'm like, oh my God, like I did this exact same mistake that these candidates did. So you don't want to be reading other people's personal statements, because then that really will interfere with your personal statement. Secondly, you don't want to regurgitate your CV at all, right? Yeah. There's a reason the CV exists. The PD is going to read it and they're going to know what your credentials are, where you went to school, your scores, and yada, yada, yada. They don't want to be reading the same exact thing in the personal statement. Many people make that mistake, and I did the same thing where I was just like kind of just summarizing my CV again in the personal statement, and that's a wrong thing to do. You don't want to talk about your CV at all. Personal statement is about your struggles, right? The way you kind of overcome difficulties, right? How you were able to overcome a failure, for example, right? Your role models. So it's completely, it's like two different things. You don't want to confuse your CV and your personal statement. So keep it personal. Do not regurgitate your CV, and then you want to kind of tell them why you want to do this, right? So it should kind of lead to why is it that so and so should be accepted in this residency program. And once you incorporate these three things, you will have a very good personal statement. It does not happen in a day. It does not happen in 6 hours like I did it. It will take time. It will take several attempts, right? And once you think you have it perfect, have someone read it, because they'll come up with issues with it, and then you got to revise it again. So it takes about, give or take, about 4 weeks to really write a good personal statement, right? Because you yourself will be thinking of ideas that you can incorporate. So don't rush it. Take your time. Keep it personal. And remember, you're unique, so you want to write a unique personal statement. Do not read online. Do not read online.
I think it just stays in the back of your mind. Even if you try, you will.
You can't. Like I'm telling you, like I was using my grandmother as an excuse, right? And you read online, there's so many people that use the same excuse. So when I was reading that personal statement as a PGY 5 and I read the whole drama statement, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I did. So you do not use your grandma as an excuse, guys.
Yeah. So what do you think is the importance of research publications when you're applying to a residency program? Do you think that program directors look at the number of publications an applicant has?
So I think this is a tricky question to answer, because I think nowadays the match is getting so much more complicated and difficult that number really matters. But the exact number really is hard to kind of gauge, right? NRMP releases the data every year. So if you're applying, let's say next year, you want to look at the last year's data, and you can kind of get an idea as to how much publications someone had in a specific field. It's usually really high in like highly competitive fields like dermatology, ENT, ortho, like those people are like PhD level, right? Whereas it's a little lower in other less competitive specialties like pathology or family med. No hard feelings. I mean, there are hard matches, but it's just that those applicants have less number of publications. But everyone is required now to do some sort of research. It's almost like a marker of like a checkbox that the PD has to kind of check that some sort of research is done. But why you should do research, right? That's important. You shouldn't just do it to beef up your CV. I saw a CV where the person had like 20, 30 case reports, and I'm like, oh, but why, right? Like, what's the whole point of that?
Yeah.
So why do you want to do research? Is you want to try to submit those abstracts to conferences. Why? Because you want to get your face out, right? You want to be present at the conferences. You want people to see who you are. You want people to hear how you are, right? If you can get a oral presentation at a conference, that's the best thing. There will be PDs present. There will be someone present in the audience that's going to hear you talk, and that's going to put a face to your name, a face to your application, right, when you apply later. So that's the whole purpose of research. It's not to beef up your CV with a countless number of irrelevant publications that no one really cares about. That's just present on PubMed or Google Scholar or whatever. No, like the PD's not going to click through your. Trust me on this. The PD's not going to click through your 40 case reports and be happy with it. I mean, on the other hand, they'll be really happy with one small oral presentation that you did in which you were able to enunciate and able to kind of get your message across. And that's kind of what they're looking for. Like, can this person talk medically, right? Because they don't know you, especially if you're an IMG. So that's the whole purpose of presentations and abstracts and research, right? Not to sit on a bench for 2 years and titrate and whatnot. That just doesn't translate to being a good clinician.
I think it's about creating impact and really making it a difference when you're doing a paper, not just publishing a higher number of papers.
Yeah, if you can articulate one paper well in front of an audience and you can capture that audience, that's it. You've got them. You have them where you want them, right? Versus 20 publications and you can't articulate a simple sentence. That's not gonna go well with you.
So what do you think is the best way to get a clinical elective in the US? Because by the 4th or 5th year of medical school, especially in Pakistan, students go abroad for clinical electives, but they find it very difficult to find one. So how do you think they should go about this?
It's becoming harder, unfortunately. COVID kind of messed up a lot of things. A lot of programs are just like are not accepting international students, right? But it's not impossible. People are still doing it. Some of the requirements are step one, right? Just get it out of the way. It doesn't even matter anymore. It's not even a score. It's just a requirement now, right? So but get that out of the way. Start early. There's no need to wait until your 4th and 5th year. You can always plan ahead, right? So start now. I tell every student, what are you waiting for? Start now, right? The worst is they're gonna say no, and you can apply next year again, right?
Yeah.
So the earlier you start, the more checkbox you have checked off, the better your chance is gonna be, right? And try to broaden your goal, right? Everyone wants to go to Harvard, everyone wants to go to Yale, right? It's really competitive. I mean, they have competition amongst American medical grads to go there, right? So IMGs really would have a tough time. You would kind of end up wasting your time. So you want to broaden your goal, have a goal of being accepted anywhere, because all you're looking for is US clinical experience, right? So if you broaden your goal and you cover your checkbox, or you cover everything, all the requirements, and you start early, you can actually get a pretty decent elective at a decent time of your choosing. Right? Otherwise, it's like you're kind of just accepting whatever there is, and or the program is really asking for a lot. It's just not working in your favor if you're gonna do it at the end, and if you haven't really taken your steps.
Yeah.
The more exams you take earlier, the better. I mean, from my personal experience, it really made things a lot easier.
I think it's all about learning and getting that experience.
Yeah, I mean, you'll probably hear this term that as an IMG, you're not a chooser. You're the other word that I'm not going to use. So when you're in that situation, you just want to accept whatever you get, right? You're already on the outside. You're already an outsider, and if you're getting an opportunity, pounce on it. Don't let your ego get in the way, because any U.S. clinical experience is better than none. So keep your goals high, but also be opportunistic. If you get an opportunity, jump on it.
Yeah. Talking about US clinical experience and all of the other things, Pakistani medical students want to get mentorship and want to work with doctors from the US who are practicing over there. So how do you think they can approach them, and what do you think is the importance of mentors in this journey?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many Pakistani doctors here, right? There's an organization called UPNA.
Yeah.
So I would tell every medical student to join it, right? Yeah, you're not in the US yet, and you're not in North America, but that's your goal. So once you join that organization as a student, it just opens up like a lot of doors for you. There's so many doctors. that have been here for decades and are just so established that they can easily take you on as a student, as a shadower, as a mentee, for example. So join such organizations, right? And just reach out. What's the worst that can happen? They'll say no, and you just move on. Right? It's not the end of the world. Taking a step is much better than ruminating on it and thinking on it. So I think joining these organizations and reaching out would be my advice. Secondly, you don't want to have one mentor, because then you're just dependent on that person, and that puts pressure on them as well. Try to have multiple mentors, right? Try to have mentors that kind of relate to what you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to do step one, have a mentor for that. If you're trying to do residency matching, have a mentor for that. If you're trying to apply for fellowship, have a mentor for that. So your mentors should kind of change as your requirements and your situation changes. It kind of makes you flexible. It takes a pressure off of them because no one wants to lead their mentee to a failure, right? So you really want to be smart about choosing mentors and be flexible with them and kind of change them as your situation changes. But don't forget them at the end of the day.
Yeah. I read this tweet earlier. I think yesterday I read a tweet where a doctor from the US mentioned that the MASH 2023 applicants in particular should use Twitter and social media to their advantage and be more active on social media, especially Twitter. Do you think that it is important nowadays to have a social media presence for doctors to get into a good program in the US?
I don't think it's a requirement. I think they're putting too much pressure and unnecessary importance on social media. Social media is a good way to break barriers, right? It's a good way to make you enter, let's say, the social circle of a person that you would not have otherwise, at least online, right? It's a good way to get your face out there if you want to, publish your picture, your ass picture, and mention that you've applied. It's a kind of a good way to kind of introduce yourself superficially. You don't want to use social media as like the only thing that's going to help you, right? It's a good way to kind of get your name and kind of get your goals out there. It's also a good way to network if it works in your favor. If you can find mentors online like that, that's a good way to do that. But be careful. Social media can be a double-edged sword, right? Like people, if they find your previous posts and pictures and the statements that you passed when you were a teenager, that can come back to haunt you. So be very careful with how much you want to expose your social media footprint, right? I would actually caution, if you feel like you got something controversial on social media, change your name, deactivate the account. PDs, program coordinators, people can easily find you online, right? And once it's on the internet, it's never gone. So I've known cases of people who suffered because they posted something silly back in the day when they didn't know what they were doing, and it came back to haunt them, and that can really affect your career. So kind of take it with a pinch of salt, if you will. It's good if you use it very superficially to just kind of get your name out there, but it can really hurt you if you've been controversial in the past. I'm talking about like religion, race, politics. All that might not fly with the current state of affairs these days. So just be careful. It's good, but just don't let it hurt you. Does that make sense? I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that as an applicant, you want to be in a position where you're seeking help, where you're looking for mentors, where you want to learn. You want to be in that position, as opposed to passing statements and showing your judgmental side. No one wants to see that. And if they've already seen that on social media, game over. You're not going to be invited for an interview. You've already shown that side that it's not going to fly. Does that make sense? You want to be in a position where you are just open to learning, and you're like just eager to learn, and you're just such a friendly person. You're a social butterfly, things like that. If you have shown your difficult side, it's not going to work in your favor.
Yeah. We've talked about residency, and you're currently working as a surgeon in robotic surgery. And I think that's a very interesting field, and it's going to only get better in the future. So how do you see medicine 40 to 50 years from now?
Wow, 50 years. I mean, I think the medical field is going to be completely revolutionized by then. I think artificial intelligence is probably really going to be a part of our armamentarium. I think genetic therapy is really going to pick up, where you're targeting genes before they become problematic and they culminate into a disease. I think preventive medicine is really going to take off, where you really want to prevent the diseases from happening in the first place. And I think the paradigm of diseases are going to change. Unfortunately, cancer is going to go up, cardiovascular disease is going to go up. In the U.S., obesity is like just nonstop. It's a pandemic, of obesity. So problems related to obesity is going to be rampant. So I think the current medicine that we know, it's going to be completely changed in 50 years. I mean, we're definitely going to have more robots, different types of robots operating and helping us out. AI. I mean, I think telesurgery, telemedicine rather, is going to be an important part of our day-to-day affairs. So I think that the history taking and the SOAP notes, I think that's just going to be a thing of the past. You're probably going to know the entire history of the person initially just by looking at them through like AI or like this like the meta world, the whole fake world scene that's going on these days. So it's just, I feel like the medicine is just going to be completely revolutionized maybe in like 10, 20 years, let alone 50 years.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's really exciting. And I hope that we can be a part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just, it's a very exciting field to be part of. And it's very satisfying at the end of the day.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming and joining us for this interview. It was an honor having this conversation with you. I'm sure everyone will find this very helpful. And I hope that we can have you again on the podcast soon.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here. Good luck, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.